My father's ghost lives in the garage, not as a spectral presence or a rattling of chains, but in the scent of motor oil and old leather, and in the solid, silent reality of his car. A 1969 Ford Mustang, not pristine, not a collector's showpiece, but a work in progress, a beautiful, imperfect thing he was slowly bringing back to life before his heart gave out far too young. It rests under a gray canvas cover, a sleeping giant, the last tangible piece of him left on this earth. My hands know the curve of its fenders, the slight crack in the dashboard vinyl, the satisfyingly heavy clunk of its driver's side door. It does not belong to me by law, not yet, but it belongs to me by heart. My name is Clara Maeve Riley, and I am an archivist. I work in the quiet, climate-controlled basement of a city museum surrounded by things that have outlived their owners. My job is to preserve the past, to protect it from the ravages of time and neglect. I handle brittle photographs and faded letters, cataloging the evidence of lives lived. I am, by nature and by profession, a keeper of memories. This is why my stepfather, Gary, is a source of constant, low-grade friction in my life. He is not a bad man. He is simply a man with no reverence for the past. He is a salesman of commercial kitchen equipment, a purveyor of the new and the shiny. He sees our family home not as a repository of memories, but as a series of projects. He wants to tear down walls, retile bathrooms, and build a deck where my father's rose garden used to be. He is a man who believes in moving forward, always forward, and he cannot understand why I seem so determined to be looking back. My mother, Helen, is caught in the middle. I see the love she has for Gary. He brought laughter back into this house after a long, silent year of grief. But I also see the way she winces, just slightly, every time he suggests an improvement. She is tired. Tired of grieving. Tired of the quiet weight of my father's absence. Gary is her escape, her path to a simpler, brighter future. And the car in the garage, my father's ghost, is a complication. I go to the house every Sunday. It's my ritual. I check the battery tender. I wipe the dust from the chrome. I sit in the driver's seat and breathe in the scent of him. It's my church, my therapy, my one quiet act of defiance against the relentless march of time. Last week, Gary had leaned against the doorframe of the garage while I was polishing the grill. He'd said in his reasonable sales pitch voice, "A classic car like that is just a money pit. It's a shame to let it just sit here and rust. We could probably get a decent price for it. Use the money to finally build that deck." I had frozen, my hand still on the cool metal. "It's not for sale, Gary," I'd said, my voice as cold as the concrete floor. "It's Dad's." He'd held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Hey, used at Toget, no need to bite my head off." But I saw the look in his eye, the look of a man who sees a problem he wants to solve. He didn't see a memory. He saw a junker taking up valuable real estate. He saw an obstacle on the path to his new deck. And I knew with a sudden sickening certainty that this was a battle I had not yet won. The discovery came on a Sunday like it always did. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind of day my dad would have loved for a drive. I let myself into my mother's house with my old key, calling out a hello that went unanswered. A note on the kitchen counter said they'd gone out for a drive to see the fall colors. I felt a small sense of relief. It meant I could have my time in the garage without interruption, without Gary's presence looming in the doorway. I grabbed the soft cloths and the bottle of chrome polish from under the sink and headed out the back door. I keyed in the code for the garage door opener. The heavy door groaned its way up, rolling slowly towards the ceiling. It revealed the space within, inch by agonizing inch, and then it stopped. The garage was empty. I stood there, frozen on the threshold, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The space where the Mustang should have been, where it had been for the last 15 years, was a void. A clean, concrete square. The battery tender was coiled neatly on the workbench. The canvas cover was folded on a shelf. The oil stain on the floor, a map of 1,000 tiny leaks, was the only evidence it had ever been there at all. No. The word was a silent scream in my head. No, 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 no. Maybe they'd taken it for a drive. But the note had said they'd gone for a drive, and Gary couldn't drive a stick shift. And my mother hadn't driven that car since my father passed. Maybe it was at a mechanic's, but they would have told me. I walked into the empty space, my footsteps echoing in a way they never had before. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. I ran my hand along the workbench where my father's tools still lay in neat rows. I saw the grease-stained rag he'd used the last time we'd worked on the carburetor together. The panic began to subside, replaced by something cold and heavy, a dreadful certainty. I thought of Gary's words last week. We could probably get a decent price for it. I thought of the look in his eye. I walked back into the house, my movements stiff and robotic. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cheerful, loopy handwriting on my mother's note. Gone for a drive. Back around 5. Love. Mom and Gary. Love. The words seemed like a cruel joke. They had done it. He had done it. While I was at work cataloging other people's memories, he had come into my father's space and removed the last, most important piece of him. He hadn't just sold a car. He had committed an act of erasure. He had dug up my father's grave to build himself a deck. And my mother, my own mother, had led him. She had held the shovel. They came home just after 5 there, arms full of grocery bags, laughing about something they'd seen on the road. They looked happy, normal. The sight of it sent a sliver of ice through my heart. My mother saw me at the table and her smile faltered. Clara, honey, what are you doing here? I thought you'd be gone by now. Gary came up behind her, setting the bags on the counter. Hey, Clara May decided to stick around for dinner. He was still using that folksy, familiar nickname I hated. I didn't answer either of them. I just looked at my mother, my expression flat. The car is gone. I said ... It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. My mother's face crumpled. The guilty, pained expression she wore was all the confession I needed. Oh, honey, she began, wringing hair hens, we were going to tell you. It's sold, I said, my voice as empty as the garage. It was Gary who answered, his tone bright and pragmatic, as if he were announcing a successful business deal. You bet it is. You won't believe the price I got for it, Clara. Some young guy, a rel enthusiast, paid cash on the spot. It was a rust bucket, honey, a money pit. This is a good thing. I already got a quote for the new deck. We can have it built before winter. He was proud of himself. Genuinely, beamingly proud. He thought he had done something wonderful for us. The absolute, profound disconnect from my reality was staggering. He was a man speaking a foreign language I couldn't comprehend. He had no right, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Now, let's not be dramatic, Gary said, his smile dimming slightly. The title was in your mom's name as the surviving spouse. It was all perfectly legal. I turned my gaze to my mother, who was staring at the floor. You signed it, I asked her. You signed away Dad's car. Clara, please, she pleaded, her voice thick with unshed tears. It was just sitting there. It was a shrine. Your father wouldn't have wanted you to be chained to that garage forever. He would have wanted us to move on, to be happy. She was using my father against me, using his memory to justify its desecration. It was a betrayal so deep it felt physical. A hollow ache in my chest. / You don't get to tell me what he would have wanted, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden seismic rage. You gave up that right when you let this stranger into his house to sell off his life for spare parts. He is not a stranger. My mother cried, her own anger flaring up. He is my husband, and this is his house now, too. You have to accept that. This endless mourning has to stop, Clara. It's not healthy. It's a car, just a car, just a car. The 2 words severed the last fraying thread of my composure. I stood up from the table, my chair scraping harshly against the linoleum floor. I looked at them. My mother with her tear-streaked face and her desperate need for a new life. My stepfather with his clueless, destructive pragmatism. They were a team, and I was the opposition. I see, he said, my voice suddenly, terrifyingly calm. I had moved past rage into a place of cold, clear resolve. You've made your position very clear. I walked to the door, my movements precise. Clara, wait, my mother called after me. I paused at the door but didn't turn around. You said it was all perfectly legal. Gary, I said, my voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. I hope for your sake that you're right. And then I walked out, closing the door gently behind me, leaving them in the ruins of what used to be my family. Grief is a strange, mutable thing. For 3 years, my grief had been a quiet, melancholic ache, a sadness that lived in the background of my life, a constant, low hum. But in the car, on the drive back to my own apartment, it began to transform. The sadness crystallized. It hardened. It turned into something sharp and cold and heavy. It turned into rage. They thought I was mourning a car. They thought I was a sad, lonely girl who couldn't let go. They had diagnosed my love as an illness, something to be cured by a new deck and a dose of pride. They didn't understand that they hadn't just sold a piece of machinery. They had taken a sacred object and sold it for scrap. They had bulldozed a monument, and the casual, almost cheerful way they had done it was the deepest insult of all. My mother's words echoed in my head. It has to stop, Clara. And I found myself agreeing with her. The endless mourning, the quiet, passive tending of a memory. It did have to stop. It was time for something else. It was time for action. When I got back to my small, quiet apartment, I didn't cry. I went to my laptop and began to work. I was an archivist. My life was about research, documentation, and the careful, methodical piecing together of the past. I would apply the skills of my profession to the problem at hand. Gary had said it was perfectly legal. He'd said the title was in my mother's name. But was it my father had died without a will? I knew enough about intestate succession to know that his assets didn't just magically transfer. They went into his estate, an estate to which my mother and I were both heirs. I spent hours that night falling down a rabbit hole of my state's DMV regulations and probate law. I read about title transfers for deceased owners, about the required affidavits, the notarized signatures, the death certificates. It was a maze of bureaucracy designed to prevent exactly what I suspected had just happened: fraud. For a vehicle to be sold from a deceased owner's estate, the title had to be properly transferred first. This required the signature of the executor or the legal heiress. My mother could have signed it, yes, but only after she had been legally designated as the sole inheritor of the vehicle, a process that would have involved me, the other primary heir, signing off on my share, something I had most certainly never done. So there were two possibilities. Possibility one, my mother had gone through the proper legal channels to have the title put in her name alone, a process that would have required my legal consent, which she had somehow obtained through forgery or deceit. Unlikely, she was a terrible liar. Possibility two, the title was still in my father's name, and to sell it, someone had to have signed that title, a signature that was not my father's. My blood ran cold. Gary / practical. Problem-solving Gary. He wouldn't have wanted to bother with lawyers and courts. That was all messy and complicated. He would have wanted a simple solution. He would have seen a signature line and seen it as one last little obstacle to getting his deck built. And he would have signed it. Or, more likely, he would have had my mother sign my father's name. A clumsy, desperate forgery. It was a theory, a terrible, ugly theory. But it fit the facts. It fit them. My quest was no longer emotional. It was now about evidence. I wasn't just a grieving daughter anymore. I was an archivist building a case. I was hunting for the primary source document that would prove the crime, the signed title. The next morning, I called in sick to work. The quiet, dusty archives of the museum felt like a world away. My own personal history had become far more urgent. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who understood the law, someone who could navigate the bureaucracy of the DMV and the courts. I needed a lawyer. I didn't want a stuffy, old-school attorney from a big downtown firm. I wanted someone young, hungry, someone who would see my case not as a messy family squabble, but as a clear-cut case of fraud. I found him on the third try. His name was Ben Carter, no relation to the weasel from the last story. A different Ben, a young lawyer whose small office was in a slightly run-down building on the edge of town. His website said he specialized in consumer protection and fraud cases. I sat across from him in his cluttered office, a signed photo of him with the local minor league baseball team on the wall behind him. I told him the whole story. The car, my father, Stepdad, the sale, my suspicions about the title. I laid it all out in a calm, chronological narrative, the way I would lay out the history of an artifact. He listened intently, nodding, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. So, your stepfather sells a car that was part of your deceased father's estate, and you suspect he or your mother forged a signature on the title to do so. Yes. I confirmed .. And what is it you want, Ms. Riley? He asked. Do you want the money from the sale? Do you want to sue them for damages? I want the car back, I said, my voice quiet but firm. And I want him to be held accountable. I want him to understand that he can't just erase my father. Ben steepled his fingers. Let me be very clear about what you're alleging here. If your stepfather signed your father's name or had your mother do it, that's not just a civil issue between family members. Signing someone else's name to a legal document like a vehicle title for financial gain is a felony. It's called title fraud. If we can prove it, he could face serious criminal charges. Prison time is not out of the question. Are you prepared for that? Prison? The word hung in the air. The thought of Gary, clueless, deck-building Gary in a prison jumpsuit was surreal. A part of me recoiled from it, but another part, the cold, angry part, didn't flinch. Actions have consequences. He had taught me that himself. Yes, I said. I am. He nodded slowly, a small, impressed smile on his lips. Okay then. Here's what we need to do. First, we need to prove the sale. We need to find the buyer. Then we need to get a copy of the signed title certificate that was submitted to the DMV. That document is our smoking gun. Getting it will be tricky. The DMV doesn't just hand those out, but as your legal counsel, I can subpoena it. How do we find the buyer? I asked. Your stepfather said he was a young guy, a real enthusiast, and he paid cash. That sounds like a private sale. He probably found him on Craigslist or a classic car forum. We start digging. I felt a surge of purpose. This was a plan, a series of logical, achievable steps. It was a language I understood. I can do that. I said, I'm good at research. Good, Ben said, standing up to shake my hand. His grip was firm. You get me a name, Ms. Riley, and I'll get you the proof. And then we let the district attorney do their job. I walked out of his office not feeling like a grieving daughter anymore. I felt like a plaintiff, and it was a much more powerful feeling. The hunt for the buyer became my obsession. It was a welcome distraction from the deafening silence from my mother. She hadn't called, not once. I knew she was angry, but I also suspected she was scared. She knew what they had done was wrong. Her silence was its own kind of confession. I became a digital ghost, haunting the corners of the internet, where car enthusiasts gathered. I scoured Craigslist archives, Facebook Marketplace listings, and specialized forums for Ford Mustang owners. I created spreadsheets of every 69 Mustangs sold in my state in the last month. I cross-referenced usernames and email addresses. It was painstaking, tedious work perfectly suited to my archivist's temperament. After 3 days of dead ends, a phoned eat, a post on a vintage Ford forum. The username was Mustang Mike 88. The post was euphoric. Just picked up my dream car. 69 fat. Needs a ton of work, but the bones are good. Got it for a steal from an old guy out in the suburbs whose wife wanted him to clear out the garage. Here she is. And there it was. A picture of my father's car parked in a different driveway in front of a different house. But it was her. I knew the slight dent in the passenger side door. I knew the way the chrome on the bumper was peeling just a little at the edge. Seeing it felt like a punch to the gut. A violation. My sacred object was now just someone else's project car. My hands were shaking as I wrote the email. I created a new anonymous email address. I couldn't be Clara Riley, the vengeful daughter. I had to be someone else. I posed as a fellow enthusiast. 2. Mustang Mike 88. Subject. You're 69 fastback. Hey. Saw your post on the forum. Gorgeous car. I have a 68 myself. I'm always looking for good, original parts. I was wondering if you could tell me if the VIN plate on the dash looks original. A lot of these old Fords have had them replaced. If you could send a pic, that would be amazing. Thanks. It was a long shot. A ridiculous, flimsy pretext, but car guys love to talk about their cars. An hour later, hey Replied, thanks. Yeah, she's a beauty. Here's a pic of the VIN, looks original to me. What do you think? He'd attached a photo and there it was. The vehicle identification number, the car's unique, unchangeable fingerprint, I had it. I immediately called my lawyer, Ben. I have the VIN, I said, my voice trembling with adrenaline. And I have the new owner's username and email address. You're a rock star, Ms. Riley, he said, a note of genuine admiration in his voice. That's everything I need. I'll draft the subpoena for the DMV records first thing in the morning. We're going to get that title, and then we're going to nail him. Hanging up the phone. I felt a grim satisfaction. But as I looked at the picture of the Mustang in another man's driveway, another feeling crept in. The buyer, this Mustang Mike, he wasn't the villain. He was just a guy who loved cars, who thought he'd gotten a lucky break. He was an innocent party. And the legal storm I was about to unleash was going to hit him. 2. The car would be seized as evidence. His dream would become a nightmare. My clean, righteous quest for justice was getting messy. It was no longer a simple case of right and wrong. There was collateral damage, and I had to decide if I was willing to live with it. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but the wheels of a determined lawyer with a subpoena can sometimes move a little faster. It took 2 weeks, 2 weeks of agonizing, silent waiting. But finally, Ben called. I have it, he said, his voice crackling with a triumphant energy. A certified copy of the certificate of title for your father's Mustang, filed with the DMV 3 weeks ago. It's everything we hoped for. And worse. What does it say? I asked, my heart pounding. / It lists the seller as your father, Michael Riley. The buyer is a Michael Petrovic. The sale price is listed as $5,000. $5,000. Gary had probably pocketed the rest. And the signature for the seller? He paused dramatically. It is a clumsy, almost laughable attempt at your father's name. It's signed Michael Riley, but the handwriting doesn't even remotely match the original signature on the title when he first bought the car. It's an obvious forgery. I closed my eyes, a wave of dizzying vindication washing over me. I was right. My terrible, ugly theory was correct. So, what now? Now we take the final step, he said, his voice turning serious. I have all the evidence I need. Your testimony, the online forum posts, the VIN, and now the forged title itself. The next step is to file a formal police report. You will need to come down to the station with me. You will have to sit down with a detective and give a sworn statement naming your stepfather, Gary Franklin, as the individual who sold the car and committed the fraud. Once that report is filed, the police will open a criminal investigation. It will be out of our hands and in the hands of the district attorney. Are you ready for that, Clara? He'd used my first name for the first time. Was I ready? Was I ready to walk into a police station and formally accuse my stepfather of a felony? To set in motion the chain of events that could lead to his arrest, his public humiliation, his imprisonment, to irrevocably destroy what was left of my family. I thought about my father. I thought about his hands, steened wet grassy, as he patiently taught me how to change the oil. I thought about the sound of his laughter as we'd driven it, for the first time after getting the engine to turn over. I thought of him telling me this car isn't just metal. Clara May, it's freedom. And I thought of Gary telling me it was a rust bucket. I thought of my mother telling me it was just a car. They hadn't just sold a piece of property. They had sold my father's freedom, his joy, his memory, for the price of a new deck. The collateral damage to the buyer, Michael Petrovic, was a painful consequence. But it was a consequence of Gary's actions, not mine. He was a victim here. U.S. ESA's Wes, and the only person responsible for any of this was Gary. Yes, I said to Ben, my voice clear and steady, I'm ready. The police station was a drab, institutional building that smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. I sat beside Ben in a small, windowless interview room as I told my story to a wary-looking detective named Miller. I laid out the facts, calmly and chronologically, just as I had for Ben. I provided him with the file Ben had prepared, the printouts, the photos, the certified copy of the forged title. Detective Miller looked through the file, his expression impassive. He looked up at me, / you understand what this means, Miss, he asked. You're accusing your own stepfather of a serious crime. If the DA pursues this, he will be arrested. It's going to cause a world of trouble for your family. My family is already in a world of trouble, I replied quietly. I'm just the one who's finally turning on the lights. He nodded, slowly closing the file. Okay, Ms. Riley, we'll take it from here. We walked out of the station and into the bright sunlight. I felt strangely calm. The archivist had done her job. The evidence was submitted. The historical record was now in the hands of others. I had done all I could do, / and all that was left was to wait for the explosion. The arrest happened on a Wednesday. I wasn't there to see it, but my mind conjured the scene with a cinematic, horrifying clarity. A police car pulling up to my mother's house in the middle of the quiet, suburban afternoon. The neighbors peering through their blinds. The sharp, official knock on the door. Gary, confused, trying to explain. My mother's dawning, hysterical horror as they put him in handcuffs and placed him in the back of the car. The phone call came an hour later. It wasn't my mother, it was my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. Her voice was a mixture of shock and fury. Clara, what in God's name have you done? She demanded. Your mother just called me, she's incoherent. They arrested Gary. The police came and took him away in handcuffs, like a common criminal, she said. She said it was because of you. Because of that old car. It's not because of the car, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. It's because he broke the law. He is your stepfather. She cried. He's been a good husband to your mother. He made her happy. How could you do this to your own family? He's not my family, I said, the words tasting like poison. / He's just the man who sold my father's memory and forged a legal document to do it. My family fell apart a long time ago. I'm just cleaning up the mess. This isn't cleaning up a mess. Clara, this is pouring gasoline on a fire. She shot back. Your mother is destroyed. You have broken her heart. I hope you're happy. I hope your revenge feels good. She hung up on me. Revenge. Was that what this was? I sat in the silence of my apartment, her words echoing in my ears. I had told myself this was about justice, about accountability. / about protecting my father's legacy. But as I pictured Gary sitting in a holding cell, as I pictured my mother's shattered face, the clean, righteous lines of my quest began to blur. The victory felt nauseatingly hollow. There was no satisfaction, no sense of a wrong being righted, .. just a deep, profound ache. An ache for my mother, an ache for the family I used to have. I had set out to punish the man who had desecrated a shrine, but in doing so I had taken a sledgehammer to the last crumbling walls of my own family. The next few weeks were a study in isolation. No one called. Not my mother, not my aunt, not a single member of my extended family. It was as if I had ceased to exist. I had been excommunicated, cast out for my unforgivable sin. I went to work at the museum. I went home. I ate alone. I slept alone. I was an island, surrounded by a sea of silent, angry disapproval. Ben, my lawyer, was my only point of contact with that other world. He called with updates. Gary had been released on bail. The DA was formally pressing charges for felony title fraud. A court date was set. The Mustang had been impounded by the police as evidence. The young mechanic, Michael had been contacted. He was devastated, having sunk over $1,000 of his own money into parts already. He was now a key witness for the prosecution. Every update was another turn of the screw, another confirmation that this was real, that there was no going back. I had set a massive, unstoppable machine in motion, and I was terrified of where it was headed. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, and wonder if there was any version of the future where I wasn't completely and utterly alone. Had I made a terrible mistake? Or was this just the painful, unavoidable cost of justice? The first crack in the wall of silence came a month after the arrest. An email from my mother. The subject line just said, Clara. My heart leaped into my throat as I clicked. It opened. Clara, I don't know what to say to you. My husband is facing prison because of my daughter. My daughter won't speak to me because of my husband. I feel like my life has been torn in two. Gary is not a bad man. He is a good man who made a stupid, thoughtless mistake. He didn't understand what that car meant. To you or to me. I know I failed you. I should have protected your father's things. And I should have protected you. I was just so tired of being sad. And he made me feel like I could be happy again. I know that's no excuse. I am so sorry. I don't know how we can ever fix this. But I miss my daughter. I'm begging you, please, talk to me. We need to find a way to stop this love. Mom, the email was a mess of guilt, apology, and desperation. But it was the first time she had admitted she was wrong. I should have protected you. The words I had been waiting to hear my whole life. Tears streamed down my face as I read it over and over. The anger I had been nursing for weeks began to dissolve, leaving behind only the deep, foundational ache of sadness. I agreed to meet her. We met at a neutral coffee shop, a sterile, impersonal place where neither of us had any history. She looked terrible. She had lost weight and there were dark, bruised-looking circles under her eyes. She looked like an old woman. He could go to prison. Clara, she whispered as soon as we sat down. For up to 5 years. His lawyer told us for a car. It wasn't for a car, Mom, I said gently. .. It was for fraud. For forgery. Those are serious crimes. But he didn't mean any harm. She insisted, her voice cracking. He's just Gary. He's a simple man. He sees a problem. He fixes it. He doesn't think about the phalanges. He just wanted to build me a deck because he thought it would make me smile. He loves me. Clara and I love him. I know you do. Mom. Then please, she begged, reaching across the table and taking my hand. Her hand was cold, trembling. Please, you have to drop the charges. Call the police, the DA, whoever. .. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you've changed your mind. I pulled my hand away slowly. I can't, I said, my voice heavy. .. You don't understand. This isn't a civil lawsuit where I can just call it off. I filed a police report for a felony. The state is prosecuting him now, not me. It's out of my hands. The hope drained from her face, leaving it slack with despair. So that's it. There's nothing we can do. I didn't say that. I said, I told her about my lawyer, Ben. I told her about the evidence. And then I told her what Ben had explained to me. I'm the victim here. And the primary witness. My testimony matters more than anyone's. I can't make the charges disappear, but I can talk to the DA. I can tell them I don't believe he acted with malicious intent. I can recommend leniency. I can tell them I don't want to see him go to prison. It might make a difference. It might not, but it's the only card I have left to play. She stared at me, a flicker of hope returning to her eyes. Will you do it? She whispered for me. Will you help him? I looked at my mother, at her tired, broken face. And I realized this was no longer about Gary. It was about her. My actions had pushed her to the brink, and now I was the only one who could pull her back. My quest for justice for my father had led me to this impossible choice. Whether or not to save my mother's husband, I don't know. I said, honestly, I really don't know. The conversation with my mother left me feeling more conflicted than ever. My cold, clear sense of purpose was gone, replaced by a messy, tangled knot of guilt and obligation. I had set out to get justice for my father, but now I was being asked to show mercy for my stepfather. I went to see my lawyer. I laid out the situation, my mother's plea, my own confusion. Ben listened patiently, his expression unreadable. So, the question is, he said when I'd finished, what does justice look like to you now, Clara? I don't know anymore. I admitted at first it was simple. He did something wrong and he should be punished. But now, seeing my mom, the thought of him actually going to prison feels wrong. Too big for the crime. He's not a master criminal. He's just a clueless, pragmatic idiot who doesn't understand sentiment. He's a clueless, pragmatic idiot who committed a felony. Ben corrected gently. Let's not forget that. But I understand what you're saying. You wanted him to be held accountable. And he is being held accountable. He's been arrested. He's spent a fortune on lawyers. His nemi has been dragged, Troget Temud, and he has a felony charge hanging over his head. He is not getting away with this, no matter what happens. He was right. My initial goal had, in many ways, already been achieved. Gary knew he couldn't just erase my father. He had learned his lesson in the most brutal way possible. So what are my options? I asked. You have a lot of power. Here, Ben explained, as the victim. Your wishes carry a lot of weight with the district attorney. We can approach the DA and propose a deal. It's called a plea bargain. Gary would have to plead guilty to the felony charge, which means he would have a criminal record for the rest of his life. That is non-negotiable. But in exchange for his guilty plea, and with your recommendation, the DA might agree to a sentence of probation instead of prison time. He would also have to pay full restitution. Restitution to who? I asked. Me. No, Ben said. To the innocent buyer, Michael Petrovic. Restitution for the price of the car, plus the money he's already put into it. It would be part of his sentence. It would make the other victim, in this case, whole. It was a perfect solution, a messy, complicated, but ultimately fair solution. Gary would not get off scot-free. He would carry the weight of a felony conviction forever. The innocent buyer would be compensated for his loss, and he would avoid prison, which would, in turn, save my mother from a lifetime of heartbreak. It wasn't the vengeful, righteous victory I had once craved, but it felt like something better. It felt like justice. That's what I want, I said, a sense of peace settling over me for the first time in months. Let's make that deal. Ben smiled. I'll make the call? He paused, then looked at me, Clara, for someone who spends all their time preserving the past, you just did a pretty incredible job of creating a future. The final meeting was held in a sterile conference room at the DA's office. It was me, my mother, Gary, Ben, and Gary's expensive-looking lawyer. It was the first time I had seen Gary since the day he'd sold the car. He looked like a different man. The folksy, confident salesman was gone. He looked small and scared and deeply ashamed. He turned to me before the lawyers started talking. Clara, he said, his voice low and hoarse. I am so sorry I never understood. I see that now. I was a fool, and I desecrated your father's memory. I know I can never fix what I broke, but I will spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to your mother, and to you. I am truly, deeply sorry. It was the apology I had never thought I would get. And hearing it, I felt the last, hard knot of anger inside me finally dissolve. I just nodded, The lawyers laid out the terms of the plea bargain. Gary's lawyer explained it to him in hushed tones. A felony conviction, 5 years of probation, a $10,000 fine, and full financial restitution to Michael Petrovic. Gary agreed to everything without hesitation. He signed the papers, his hand trembling. The deal was done. The war was over. The sentencing in the courtroom was a formality, a quiet, anticlimactic end to a loud and painful war. The judge accepted the plea bargain. Gary stood before him, humbled and broken, and was sentenced to 5 years of probation. My mother stood beside him, her hand clutching his arm, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow. I sat in the back of the courtroom and watched, feeling like a ghost. Afterward, the car was released from the police impound. Legally. Mine, I went with a flatbed tow truck to pick it up. Seeing it again after so many months was a shock. It looked smaller than I remembered. and sedan covered in a fine layer of dust. Sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the impound lot, it looked like what Gary had always said it was. Just an old car. I had it towed back to the garage at my mother's house. That evening, I went to see her. Gary was there. It was awkward and quiet. We drank tea at the kitchen table. No one knew what to say. The car's back, I said finally. My mother nodded, .. I know. I saw it. I don't know what to do with it, I admitted. We were silent for a moment. You know, my mother said softly, your father. He didn't love that car because it was perfect. He loved it because it was a project. He loved the work, the process of trying to bring something broken back to life. She looked at me, her eyes full of a new, painful understanding. Maybe that's what this has all been about. A few days later, I found Michael Petrovic's email address. The young mechanic .. The innocent buyer. I wrote to him, Mr. Petrovic, my name is Clara Riley. I am the daughter of the original owner of the 1969 Mustang you purchased. I know you have been through a terrible ordeal because of my family's actions, and for that, I am deeply sorry. The court has ordered that you receive full financial restitution. The car is now legally mine. But it occurs to me that the car was never really the point. The point was the memory. And the memory of my father is not in that car anymore, it's in me. I was wondering if you would still be interested in buying it for the original price you paid. It seems to me that you're the one who should be bringing it back to life. Sincerely, Clara Riley. He replied within the hour. His email was full of gratitude and relief. He loved the car. He sighed, and he would be honored to be its new keeper. We met the following weekend. I signed the title over to him, my own name, clear and strong, on the seller's line. As he drove it away, the sound of its rumbling engine fading down the street, I didn't feel a sense of loss. I felt a sense of peace. My father's ghost was no longer in the garage. It had been set free. And so, I realized, had I